Record. Good Friday morning, friends. Welcome back for another episode of the Finding God in the Dark podcast. My name is Don,
And my name is Jonathan.
and today we are going to discuss the 2020 Roland Emmerich directed film, The Patriot, starring Mel Gibson and Heath Ledger, among other notables. Um, and if you have not seen this film, I guess the basic premise would be a reluctant farmer in South Carolina is drawn into the Revolutionary War against his will, and
Yep.
we'll leave the rest of the story up to you actually seeing the film. Um, although it is 26 years old, we're going to
We
spoil
have to
it.
do some spoilers. So,
It's just the way it is. Um, so where would you like to start here, Jonathan?
well, I do think it's important to probably note the criticism this film has received when it first came out because it is highly fictionalized.
Hmm.
Even though there are historical figures in the movie. Uh,
Representations of
yeah,
historical figures
yeah,
like Tarrington or
yeah,
Tavington is actually based on a Tarlington, I
yeah.
think.
And
Yeah.
Cornwallis is a good example of actual. Um, But the main criticism I think is a fair one to levy is two really. One is one of the most horrific scenes of this movie is when British soldiers uh, pretty much put a whole town in a church and then burn it down with them
Mhm.
in it. That did not happen. That
Yeah,
was
that's fictionalized.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then the other piece is they downplay slavery a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's be honest up front here, okay? This was a landowner
Yeah,
along the Santee River in
yeah,
South Carolina.
yeah.
He didn't have freed slaves working on his property, okay? He had slaves.
Yes. And that is not talked about at all. In fact,
No.
it's kind of even said that like he's freed them, but they don't have a conversation about that. And then of course this is set in the South, and we never mention anything about black-white dynamics, slavery. In
Mhm.
fact, they just at one point hide the family with a group of African Americans. You're just like, you know. So yeah, there's a lot of soft pedaling of slavery and racism.
It also I was actually just reading something. It's also gotten some criticism along with Braveheart, which was also a Mel Gibson film, for being
Yes,
anti-British.
yeah, yeah,
Okay, it's about the Revolutionary War.
yeah,
That's a criticism that, yeah, okay, it's fair because that's kind of the dynamic.
yeah,
But yes, those two things, particularly the slavery thing, is like, we really downplayed that a lot.
yeah, yeah,
Not that. Look, I get it. It's not an integral part of the story,
yes,
so I can understand downplaying it.
yeah,
The story, and again, a fictionalized story. The
yeah,
story is the point.
yeah. I do think they. My suggestion, I guess, if they would have asked my opinion back then, which they wouldn't have, but probably would have been if you're going to ignore it, just ignore it instead of like acting like this guy broke trends and was not involved in slavery and was against slavery. Like, don't go that direction. Go with we're not going to talk about
Yeah. Of course, then the film would have been criticized for being whitewashed,
it.
right?
Yes.
There would
Mm.
have been no black actors
Yeah.
because the black actors would have just been slaves.
Yeah.
So there's that fine line to walk where
Yeah.
okay, are we going to include it in the story? We're not going to include it in the story. How do we make it work?
Yeah.
And I think they probably for 2000 took the best route they thought they could.
Yeah.
Um, that being said, I think there are some really powerful
Yeah.
themes that we have to talk about here.
Yeah.
But the biggest one, and you put it first on the list, is really the cost of war, the cost of violence. That
Yeah.
is a strong theme through several characters in this film.
Mhm.
Where do you want to go with that, John?
Yeah, I think as much as you rightfully could criticize this film about dealing with slavery and racism, it does an actually pretty good job, I feel like, by letting you see the struggle of death and the reality that, you know, war has consequences and war is messy and war is ultimately destructive,
Yeah.
and I think I liked at the end, Ben, Mel Gibson's character says something like, "Why do men feel it necessary that to justify death?"
Yeah.
You know, or that their actions can justify death. And I think that's a good way to frame the reality that war is always costly. And even if you could create a perfect example of a just war in kind of the Christian tradition, there is still a cost to it and there's still suffering to it. And you shouldn't ignore that or diminish that.
Yeah, I mean, it's been said, and I wish I could, no, I wish I could put my finger right on who said the quote, but that in war, no one wins,
Yeah,
you know. And it's this is, very clear here. No, we know the Revolutionary War, the states won, okay, but the losses, and I think maybe the most powerful scene in that is when Cornwallis gives Tavington the freedom to, confront this guerrilla group the
yeah,
way he wants to.
yeah,
And then he goes after their families.
yeah,
And the one guy comes back to his homestead and his wife and son are dead,
yeah,
and he commits suicide.
yeah,
Which I mean, our modern sensibilities, you see that coming,
yes,
right? Yeah. But for the time, you could see the shock on the faces of those, of his comrades there.
yeah,
And that's to me one of the most powerful expressions of nobody wins.
yeah.
Nobody wins.
Yeah, I think what was interesting is they chose to have a couple times in this movie where somebody is angry about kind of being wronged, or they want to get back at other people that have hurt or killed people that they care about, and every time it backfires.
Yeah.
Like, it's in a weird way, it's kind of a statement of violence ultimately backfires.
What's that old, is it an Italian saying, when you undertake revenge, dig two graves,
Yes, yours
you
and,
know?
yeah, your victim. Yeah, yeah, that idea. And I think this is timely not only because the celebration of the 250th anniversary of the founding of the nation is coming up,
Hmm.
but also, we're in a time of war. We're debating it. We're talking about it, and I think
Hmm.
as Christians and as clergy, I think it's important for us to say that the church has a long history of saying, um, you could argue at the beginning, most Christians seem to be pacifists from the writings we have, but even after the tradition uh, of just war with Augustine started, or Augustine, sorry, saying I was in Florida, so I, but Saint Augustine starts at in the 400s, but there's this idea that you need to make sure that your actions are justified, that you need to make sure all of your actions, just not the war, is justified. You pretty much have to avoid anything that's not a defensive war that you can't avoid any other way. And those kind of principles, I think, are good principles and something that Christians should know about and talk about and encourage their leaders to try to follow.
Yeah. You're right. It is timely both and part of the reason I picked this film this week is, that we're going into this 250th anniversary celebration. I thought it would be timely. As well as the fact that somebody I listened to has been talking about it a lot, and I wanted to renew it in my mind.
Yeah,
But yeah, as well as, this, whatever you want to call this engagement in Iran,
yeah,
a war, whatever you
yeah.
want to call it. Um, yeah, it's certainly forefront in the minds of this culture right now.
Mhm.
So, um, What else? That plays into, I'm looking at your themes here. That plays into the whole what's worth dying for, what's worth killing for. Um, and that's probably, well, maybe that goes right to the heart of the Christian faith, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it
What's worth
does.
dying for,
You
right?
know, I can't think about those questions without thinking about. I'm not going to get the quote exactly right, but basically, I think it was Gandhi who talks about um, there are things worth dying for. He's not sure if there's anything worth killing for.
Mm,
And that idea of separating those two questions and ethically thinking about the difference, I think, is important because we usually jam those two things together. And we say like my family's worth dying for and killing for without kind of taking that apart and saying, okay, what does that mean and what's the difference? And I think in the Christian ethic there is a difference. Sacrificing your life and willing to give for others is a deeply held kind of foundational piece of Christian faith. The idea of killing, though, is another conversation that Christians throughout the centuries have argued and debated about.
I guess I go back even further. If we're going to ask what's worth dying for, well, let's ask Jesus.
Yeah, yeah,
Let's ask Jesus what's worth dying for
yeah,
because he did.
yes,
Um, and that's not to say that anyone in this film is a Christ figure.
no,
I don't really see that.
no,
Um, Honestly, Mel Gibson's character seems mostly motivated by revenge.
yes,
Revenge for the death of one son and then the death of his other son.
yeah.
Um,
And even Gabriel, who for a lot of the movie is kind of the North Star of why we're doing this, why
mhm.
we want a new nation, how we're going to make people free, all that kind of stuff. In the end, he dies because he can't rationally think about the death of his wife. Like
Yeah,
he
well,
can't.
he succumbs to that need for revenge too.
Yeah, yeah,
Which you know you can harp on the revenge thing for
yeah,
days. It's never wise. I
yeah,
I have never seen a situation where revenge. Look, we've talked about this before when we talked about other films,
yeah,
the idea of retributive justice, right? Um, that's a challenge because you're going back to what is it, Lex Talionis, right? An eye for an eye.
yeah,
Um, and Jesus said no.
yeah,
She said, you've heard an eye for an eye, but I tell you
yeah,
something completely different.
yeah. Love your
You know?
enemies.
Yeah.
Pray for those who persecute you. Yeah.
Yeah.
And those words, I think, whenever, I mean, I think as Americans, we really have to think about this because we often, as a country, have kind of led with our military might, especially in the
Hmm.
last 50 or 60 years. And I think it's worth us reflecting on the fact that most of us are Christians, and Christ puts before us another idea of how you're going to deal with your enemies and how you're going to deal with people that you disagree with, that you're going to pray for them, that you're going to serve them, that you're going to find ways to love them. And I don't know if I would say I'm a complete pacifist, but I do think Christians have to be very slow to becoming crusaders. And that idea is something that's challenging for Americans because in many ways our power in the world comes from our military force. It just
Hmm.
does, in a lot of ways. I know other ways economically, there's other ways, but a big part of the reality of our lives, of our culture, as I think it was Teddy Roosevelt talked about, walk softly and carry a big
Carry a
stick.
big stick.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that idea.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that because I had a thought and I'm going to be 62 next week, so it's gone now.
Congratulations. Yes,
Um,
I had a milestone myself last
did
week,
you?
so
So,
I'm good.
um, but that's I know what I was thinking. The hard part of that, okay, particularly, okay, we are a Christian nation and we want to come with that sort of non-aggressive stance. The hard part of that is that there are other nations, other cultures that will take advantage of that. And so that, the fine line that we have to try to walk there is challenging. This film does not walk that line. Not in any way, shape, or form does this film walk that line. Um, anyway, the what else?
Well, I think something that that probably we have to be careful with this because it's not a kind of a salve for everything. But one thing that you see developing in the Revolutionary War, and this movie kind of touches on it a little bit, is the formation of national identity.
Hmm.
Going from I'm a Carolinian or I'm a New Jerseyan um, to I'm an American. That shift, we start to see it in the Revolutionary War, and it builds over time. And both of us care deeply about people kind of seeing past their differences. And I do think there isn't a perfect kind of um, corrective to this. Obviously, there's issues, but it would be nice if more and more of us got back to the idea that we are Americans. That we weren't Republicans, we weren't Democrats, we were Americans. Um, and that idea of shared unity and that idea of shared purpose. I mean, I think that is really important, and I wish we could find our way back there without a horrible war that we all have to suffer through.
I mean, you're speaking right to, the polarization that has occurred in our country right now. And I don't even know where to begin with a solution because there doesn't seem to. I'm going to relate it to what has happened in our denomination.
Yeah,
Okay. Our denomination became so polarized that there was no talking to each other. We talked past each other. There was no conversation. It was just my point, your point, my point, your point, my point. And it was a separation was inevitable.
yeah,
It was just going to happen.
right,
Um, and it feels that way with the country, although I don't know how that can possibly happen with the country because the polarization isn't over locations.
yeah,
It's not like you can say, well, this state goes here, or this state goes there, and this, or
yeah.
this part of the country. It doesn't work like that.
Well, I'm a political junkie, and I like to use the analogy of when I talk about this with people, is I say, imagine 10 people in front of you. In the biggest landslide in recent American history in '64 when Johnson won the presidency and just trounced Barry Goldwater, he won 6 out of 10 votes. So if you have 10 people in front of you, that means that 4 of your neighbors in a landslide voted in another way.
Right,
And that's how that's the reality of a landslide is 6 to 4.
right,
And that's something that people need to, I think, remember is um, those people that disagree with you, they're right outside your door, and they're going to be at the grocery store with you, and they're going to wait in line at the bank with you, and they're not going away. Like they're just not.
and the challenge of being a pastor is that both of those 6 and 4 are in your church pews.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, absolutely.
even now, even after the denominational split,
Yeah,
those folks are still sitting in the church pews in both sides of the split,
yes,
you know? And that's become obvious and I won't get too deeply into this, but that's become obvious to me as chair of buildings and locations in my district because of the churches that are even after the path of disaffiliation closed, the churches that are leaving. still trying to leave. Um, it's still there. The polarization is still there. We didn't fix it by splitting. Um, so
Well, and I usually talk about this in terms of Christian realities, or
mhm.
tell people like, for a good exercise, write down on a piece of paper what you think a Christian needs to believe in or do,
Mm,
and then write that down, and then recognize what's not on your list, and recognize the bigger and bigger your list gets, the fewer and fewer people get to be part of the Christian community you want to be a part of. And if any of us make that list too long, we'll be sitting in our by ourselves in the pew.
you are your own church. Yeah.
And so I would argue you could do that as an American too. What does it mean to be American? What are the values that you want? What are the values you think are necessary? What are the things, not just values, but what are things Americans do and don't do? And if you list them all, you realize if I list too many of them, my uncle can't be an American, or or my daughter can't be American, or my neighbor down the block who helps me out every time I ask him to help me out can't be an American. You know.
But I'll challenge you on the other end of that, in that one can be so open-minded that their brain falls out.
Yes, no, absolutely. I recognize that there are boundaries.
Yeah.
I would argue that there are boundaries to Christianity. That may be something some people on the progressive side of Christianity don't like, but I would say
Mhm.
there needs to be boundaries so that we can talk about what Christians are.
And are
Having
not. Yeah.
having said that, you know, I'm usually not comfortable going past the Nicene Creed, like because again, if you go much further past the Nicene Creed, you don't have Baptists and you don't have Episcopalians, you don't have
Mhm.
Catholics, and you don't have Lutherans, and
Yeah.
so my concern is that we do need to have boundaries, and I'm okay with that. But we also need to recognize if we make our boundaries and our walls too high, we won't have anybody in there but us.
Yeah. So very true. And I think we've gotten a little astray from the film here, but important stuff nonetheless. I think, particularly when look, you and I have done this now. We have been doing this and
Yeah,
trying to demonstrate this.
yeah.
I thought it was a real testament to what we're doing, in that when we had Stephen Farrar on, he didn't know which one of us was the conservative and which was the progressive. I thought that was a real testament to where we're at. Um,
Should we
but
wear shirts?
I'll wear a red one, you wear a blue one. But
Okay.
no, I mean, but the point is, like, somewhere along the way, we have lost the ability to talk to one another.
Yeah.
Not talk past, not talk at, talk to, talk with one another.
Yeah.
We've proven this. You and I don't agree on everything, but we can still talk about those things without going, I hate that guy,
Yeah.
And that's just a problem, you know?
Well, I mean, if you're going to value freedom, but also have a community, you have to balance those things, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You know, um, my freedom can't be absolute, because if it's absolute, then my community can't exist, because everybody has to bow to me. And that kind of interaction is, I would argue, it's at the hallmark, kind of the foundational point in a lot of ways of Christian ethics, right? Jesus offers an antidote to extreme self-determination and this idea that my freedom is absolute. He challenges you to recognize that you're part of a community and that your well-being is wrapped up in that community. And so how are you also going to use your freedom to serve the community? And one of the things I really worry about as Americans is we're getting so siloed, and we're getting so focused on our own freedom and making sure we have absolute freedom, that we don't recognize that if we silo ourselves and have absolute freedom, you can't have a community.
Yeah, and that's a challenge. Ba Phew. That's a balance. That's difficult to strike, isn't it?
Yeah.
Um,
I mean,
yeah,
as corny as the ending of this movie is, and it's very corny. Um,
and predictable. And
yes, that idea of people coming together to rebuild one something that's been burnt down, right?
hmm
That idea of I'm going to give of myself so you can have a place to live. I'm not going to live here, but I'm going to help build your house. That is the essence of what makes a strong community. The fact that we do that for one another. You
The
know,
Amish do that well.
yeah,
The rest of us, not so much.
yeah. And that's deeply rooted in Christianity. I think that's what concerns me as a pastor is really pushing my flock, for lack of a better term, to recognize that our society is acidic to some of the key values of Christianity. And how do we as Christians push back against that breakdown of this idea of no, 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 community is essential. I have been given, I love Paul, can't remember what letter. No, it's First Peter, it's not Paul. First Peter talks about your gifts have been given you to benefit the common good. Like that idea of the things I have and the blessings I have and the gifts I have are mine and have been given to me, but it's not just for my benefit and my family's benefit. It's also for the community's benefit.
The church in Acts, right? The church in Acts. Um, yeah, gosh. Um, so anything else we want to say on the Patriot?
Um, how did you like the kind of the interplay of looking at how pride, hatred, and fear kind of flowed through the Revolutionary War? That idea of those realities being there for almost everybody, and it being kind of the downfall of Cornwallis in this movie. This idea that he there's no way he could lose to these these undisciplined militiamen kind of thing.
I guess I didn't really think a whole lot about that.
Yeah,
I was really stuck on kind of um, Mel Gibson's character's
yeah,
motivations, and when you go back to like his story that from the French and Indian War,
yeah,
the Fort Wilderness story,
yeah,
and how that changed him, and yet it didn't really. Like it changed his outer, now I have a family and I have to take care of my family, and yet that was still an undercurrent of who he was,
yeah.
and it ultimately became sort of that savagery
Yeah.
was his fallback position.
Yeah, that it's an amazing scene where granted he's rescuing Gabriel, rescuing his son, but the whole scene where he takes out pretty much single-handedly, although his two younger sons are firing as well, but he
hmm
takes out probably about what 15, 20
It
people,
was 20, yeah.
and and at the end you see him covered in blood, and he has just beaten the heck out of this guy he has killed. Like he just won't stop
hmm
hitting him with his axe. And he stands up and he turns around and his three sons are just like, Dad?
Yeah,
So,
yeah, like didn't know that was in you. Yeah.
yeah, that idea of oftentimes we're able to hide our darkness, and sometimes we're even able to hide it from ourselves, is a part of this movie. And it's a cautionary tale, I think, that you can draw from this movie of what's really in me and how am I processing my trauma and how am I processing the difficulties in my life, and am I actually finding ways to let it go, or am I just building it up?
Yeah. In that moment, you see what he's capable of.
Yeah.
And it is, as you said, a cautionary tale. Like, what are we capable of?
Yeah.
What kind of atrocities are potentially in any one of us? Which is, well, let's go right back to Genesis. It's the fall of humanity, right? It is the sinful nature of human beings. Um, yeah, I thought that was a really powerful statement in the film. Look, we've got to wrap this one up, start talking about our next film. But as far as this goes, it's a 26-year-old film.
Yeah.
Um, it's enjoyable for what it is.
Yes.
We have intentionally picked it apart. It's
Yeah.
not a bad
Yeah.
movie.
Yeah, I would definitely say you probably need to pair it with maybe a documentary about the Revolutionary War.
Yeah, that wouldn't be bad, get some history along with it because it is not a historical story. It is a fictional story based on historical events, but it takes a lot of liberties.
Yeah, I have a sense from some of the criticism I read that it probably killed. It won 3 Oscars, but it kind of probably killed its momentum that it wasn't more historically accurate in terms of award buzz, that kind of thing.
Well, I think that's probably the nature of any film that's based in history is that you've got to fictionalize it. You
Yes.
have to you have to spruce it up to
Yeah.
make it, because let's
Yeah.
face it, real life's boring.
It's not boring, but it's much more complicated than a 2.5 hour movie can deal
That's probably better than what I said.
with.
All right, so you got a film in mind for next week, John.
Yeah, we started. Actually, we've seen all of the. I guess what's the 28 days later movies,
28 days, 28 weeks, 28 years. Yeah.
and so the next one that is in the cycle is now out on Netflix, so you can watch it. And I thought we could do the toe. It's called the Bone Temple, right? I think is what it's
Right.
called.
28 years later, The Bone Temple. Yeah.
And so I thought we should keep this going because it was a streak we had, so might as well keep the streak going.
All right. And I don't know if we mentioned it last week or not. We are working on having another guest on soon. That will be maybe a month or so from now.
Yeah.
But that's in the works.
Mhm.
So, but for next week, we're going to watch 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple. Until next week, friends, keep on finding God in the dark. We'll see y'all next Friday. Take care and God bless.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks again for watching the Finding God in the Dark podcast, friends. If you've made it here all the way to the end of the video, then obviously you find something that we're doing to be educational or informative, something valuable in this podcast. So we want to invite you to go ahead and share this with your friends, hit the like button, follow us for more of this. We publish every week at 10 a.m. on Friday mornings on YouTube. Shortly thereafter, you'll find us somewhere on Facebook. Until next Friday, keep on finding God in the dark. Thanks for watching. Bye now.